On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
We're joined now by Tim Harcourt, the airport economist and international trade and globalisation expert. Thanks so much for joining us, Tim, on Import Export today.
G'day, Lawrence. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Tim, I really want to get stuck into your thoughts on the coronavirus, and I love the new term that you've phrased. I believe it's your terminology you've invented is the coronanomics. It's a powerful term.
Yeah, I better patent that, Lawrence? Yeah. Look, I wrote an op-ed piece yesterday about the 8 things we've learnt about the coronavirus and the economic impacts, and it seems to have got a bit of lift-off. So the airport economists might be stuck at home, not flying, but the ideas are flying around the world, Lawrence.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And look, I read the article, and there's some really interesting outcomes that, basically those 8 points that you said as a result of the coronanomics. And I wanted to get your thoughts on how do you think this whole globalization, and we've had so much focus over the last couple of decades on the importance of globalization, and now that countries are being exposed, if you like, about the lack of capacity to deal with the health industries and some of the other segments that are so vital. Do you think things will ever get back to full globalisation, or are people going to have that nationalism level again?
Lawrence, I think globalisation, as we've known it over the last 30 years, is now finished. And I think there'll be a reset. I don't think there'll be an outright rejection of globalisation, particularly in Australia, where we're very multicultural and very connected to the world. But I think the nature will change. I think it will be very important for a lot of people to watch this show, whether you're in manufacturing or healthcare or agriculture. You'll become a very important part of the world trading system now on the export side. I think what will really change is this tyranny of social distance. It's going to make it very hard for any people-focused industry, tourism, education, professional services, anything that I guess you can't drop the export on your foot. It's going to find it difficult at the moment with the tyranny of social distance. So I actually think in some ways it's going to be quite good for Australian manufacturing exporters, particularly in the medical industry, because I do think, as you've alluded to, that there'll be a rise of economic nationalism. I mean, no one wants to ever get caught again where we don't have enough ventilators or masks or surgical equipment in Australia because it's part of a global supply chain based in China. So I think you're quite right, Lawrence. There'll be an increase in economic nationalism and self-sufficiency.
And Tim, what about the diversity? You mentioned China there. I mean, since January, February, when basically product dried up because people couldn't get their hands on it across automotive, other retail, other manufacturing sectors that we rely so heavily on out of China. And when they were impacted so quickly early in the year, people started to rethink their whole sourcing and even export markets. So do you see that companies now will be looking at diversifying both their sourcing markets and their export opportunities?
Oh, yeah, you make a great point, Lawrence, and I think it's great you've called your show the Import-Export Show, because 75, almost 80% of Australian exporters, as you know, are also importers at the same time. And I think what we saw with Wuhan was, this Chicago of China, of East Asia, with huge global supply chains, whether it be Apple, iPhones, automotive, steel, all revolved around Wuhan. And if people hadn't heard of Wuhan before, well, people on your show would know, but people hadn't heard of Wuhan, they have now because of the great log jams it caused to global supply chains. And I also think, Lawrence, that people have increasingly looked in emergencies to nation states. I mean, if you look at when the crisis hit Italy, where was the European Union? I mean, really ineffectual, and they let Italy have that terrible spread of the disease, and now Spain and France, and it took the Russians and the Taiwanese to send the first medical supplies to Italy, not the rest of Europe. So I think you've seen an ineffectiveness of the institutions like the European Union and the UN at a time like this. I think people are going to turn to nation states. Even in Australia, we've turned to the government to close the borders and make drastic measures. Even state governments, I mean, even Tasmania closed their border, and other states and territories followed suit.
Yeah, I think everything's been turned on its head really over the last couple of months, and I'd really love to get you back on the show, Tim, if you're open to that in the coming weeks, as things continue to evolve, and hopefully once this crisis starts to plateau out a bit and people will rethink some of these opportunities. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and as I said, I'd love to get you back on to get your insights in a bit more detail about certain markets and opportunities in the future.
Be my pleasure anytime, Lawrence. I ain't going anywhere for a while. So
That's good. We'll take advantage of it while you're on the ground.
Okay, thanks, Lawrence.
Thanks, Tim. All the best. So thanks so much for watching Import Export today. As you can hear, there's so many things moving and shifting every week. So stay tuned, and we look forward to joining you next week as well. Take care. Cheers.